Namaste and welcome back to the JavaScript series. Today, my dear friends, we are going to be discussing a very fundamental concept in JavaScript which is almost used on a day-to-day basis whenever you're building web applications using JavaScript, and that concept is none other than callbacks. Now, this concept called as a callback is something which many programmers, though they use every day, it has not really made sense to them. But don't worry, if you attend this class, all the clarity that you're seeking will be yours. Let me give you an example, okay? Now, we have discussed the concept of functions in deep in JavaScript, right? So please try to understand. I'm just creating a function. I'm just creating its general structure. You know this is how a function looks like, right? Now, I've created this function. Obviously, this function can perform some action. But right now, I'm not going to call a function. Because you know, a function will only execute or activate if you call it. I'll not call this function. Instead, I am going to create another function called as fun2. Now, please try to understand, what I will now do is, in JavaScript, functions are treated as objects. They are first-class citizens. What does that mean? If you're watching this video for the first time, I highly recommend you to go back in the series and watch the concept of functions as objects. But those of you who are regularly following the series, you know that I can take a function and pass it as input to another function. Are you able to understand? So please try to understand the function to whom I'm passing the function as input to. This function is called as a higher order function. What is it called as? Higher order function. And this function which I've passed as input, this function is called as a callback function. That's it. A function which is passed as input to another function is only in high-five words called as a callback function. Why is it called as callback? Because what they're trying to say is, you created the function, you're going to call it later. You're not going to call it now, you're going to call it later. So please try to understand, now inside this function, I'll perform a set of activities or steps, and then I will call this function here. After which, I am now going to continue with my activity. So in very simple terms, a callback is a function which is passed as input to another functions, because in JavaScript functions are objects and you can pass it as input. And within the higher order function, which is going to accept the callback as input, inside that function is where the function is going to be called. I hope it is clear. This gives you a very simple visual outlook. Now, to understand this better, we should write code. But before that, please understand, this is not just a concept which exists, which nobody is going to use. Callbacks is something which is used in JavaScript on a day-to-day basis. Example of the use cases of callbacks. In arrays, we will be using callbacks on a daily basis to perform operations. And the very next topic we are going to be covering in the series is arrays, so you will understand what I'm talking about. Event handling. When I start DOM, when you start learning React, you will understand that event handling is the fundamental concept that JavaScript is used for. And there also callbacks are used. Of course, callbacks are used in something called as asynchronous programming, into which we are going to deep dive in the future. And of course, if you're building a web application, if you're a full stack web developer, your day-to-day life will go in handling something called as HTTP requests, which fundamentally in JavaScript is handled using callbacks. So this is not just for show. There is a lot of use case behind it, right? Anyways, to understand this better, let's take an example. Let's write an example code to understand callbacks, okay? So watch it. Let us assume, friends, I'll create a function, I'll call it as add. The nature of this function is it's going to take two inputs, A and B. And within its body, it's going to just return the added result of A and B. So it'll add them together and return the result as output. Similarly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this function and I'm going to paste it 3 more times. Let's call this as sub function. This will be subtracting both. Let's call this as mul function. This will be multiplying both and returning. So as you can clearly see that I have now created 3 separate functions. Now, if in case a user, let us assume wants to do different operations between 2 numbers, say 10 and 20, okay? They want to add, they want to multiply, they want to subtract. Now, if they want to add, what should they do? They have to call a function called as add. then pass 10 and 20 to it. When I call this function, obviously add function will execute. 10 and 20 are passed as input. They will be added together and its result will be returned to me. Now if I as a programmer want to see it on my screen, I naturally need to print it, and hence I'll just cut this line and I will say console.log. I'll just log it. Whatever is returned, I'll log it. Or one more way is you collect the result inside another variable and then print the variable. Long story short, this way also you can do. Now if I were to open my terminal and if I were to execute, yes, bang on, answer is 30. Works perfectly. Now if in case I want to probably say call or do subtraction, then I have to call a different function sub. Similarly, if I want to multiply, then I should call a different function called as multiply, like this. And if in case I were to now clear the screen and re-execute the code, you can say 30 is the added result minus 10, because 10 minus 20 is minus 10 and 10 into 20 is 200. So it works perfectly. That's not the problem here we're trying to address. What I'm trying to say here is that as a user, I may have say 10 functions to perform 10 different mathematical operations. Now a programmer, to operate on two pieces of data, for each and every activity has to remember different function names. So what I would rather want to do is, I would like to create another function called as calculator. And whether it is addition, whether it is subtraction, whether it is multiplication or whether it is division, the programmer should call only the calculator function and tell the calculator function whether they want to do addition, subtraction, multiplication or division, and it should be able to do it. Understood? But calculator function on its own is not going to perform any of these operations. Instead, it is going to take the help of these functions. Now, if you understood the scenario that I have created, the way to implement it in JavaScript is using a concept called as callback. Now, what does this mean? Let me show you. All right. So now, for example, I'll now go and I will be creating another function, friend. I'll call this function itself as the calculator function, or in short calc. Now, try to understand what this function will do. This function will be taking A and B as input. And also it will take another input which I will call as callback. Now please understand, this callback is just a word. I can call it whatever I want, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, X, Y, Z, whatever. It's just a word, callback. But what is this callback? This callback is nothing but one of these functions which I will be passing as input to this function. Understand what I'm trying to say? Example. Now what I will do is, inside this, I will go and I will just say return whatever is the result of calling this callback function and passing A and B as input. Now I know this may seem very confusing to you, but it will all make sense now. Now watch it, friend. This time, instead of calling add for addition, I am going to call calculator function. To calculator function, I will be passing 10, I will be passing 20. And what is the operation I want to do? The operation I want to do is add or addition. Is there a function which can do addition for me? Yes. This function, I will pass it as input to this. And whatever it returns, I will log it by saying console.log, like this. Now, the problem with programming is clarity comes only when you understand the memory. That is the fundamental way programming has been designed, right? So let's visualize this, okay? First of all, try to understand. In JavaScript, functions are objects, which means add is nothing but an object, which I can show like this. It has an address. Every object has an address. And every object will have a reference, and that reference is only add. And what is there inside add is the address. So this is one function object called as add. Similarly, I also obviously have my subtraction function object. I also have my multiplication function objects. So I have three objects, right? For the time being, I'll remove the subtraction function object, I'll remove the multiplication function object, and let's only focus on this add function object. On the other end, my dear friends, I have my calculator function object. This is also an object only, which means please understand, in the memory, a brand new object is created which will have an address 2000. Naturally, please try to understand, this 2000 is now given a reference. And what is the reference? Calc. Calc is the reference. This 2000 comes and sits here, and this is referring to this. Once again, I would like to remind you that if whatever I'm speaking is not making sense to you, it's because you have not been watching the series in continuation. Please go back and have a look at the previous classes. All this will make sense to you. Now, please try to understand, inside this add object, I have two variables, A and B. Inside this calc object, I have three variables. One is A, one is B, and another variable called as callback. Now you will understand the magic of what you call as a callback function. Try to understand and trace the code with me. Now, whenever I call this function called as calc, and I pass 10, 20 and add, try to understand, 10 goes and sits inside the variable A. 20 goes and sits inside the variable B. Now add. What is add? This add is nothing but this add. What is there inside this add? 1000. What is this 1000? Address. Address present inside one reference variable. I am now passing it to another reference variable. So 1000 comes here. When two reference variables have the same address, both of them start to point to the same object. And hence, add is also pointing to the same function. This variable callback is also pointing to the same function. Which means this function can be accessed using the name add, can be accessed using the name callback. Both ways we can access it. I hope it is making sense. I hope you are able to wrap your head around this. Otherwise, rewind a little bit and listen to my words again. Alright, now come to this calc function. You understood how the data is. Now inside this, I am now calling a function called as callback and passing the value of A and B. Please try to understand, when I call callback, where is callback pointing to? Add function. Which means indirectly I am calling the add function itself. And inside the add function, please try to understand, I am passing the value of A and B. What is there in A and B? 10 and 20. Same 10 and 20 are now put inside add functions A and B. Now, what will add function do? Add function will simply add the value of 10 and 20 and return it. Whatever is returned will now come inside here. So what will be the value of calling this callback? The value will be 30. That 30 further I am returning, which will come here. That I am printing. That's it. Understood what I am trying to say? Now, if you didn't understand what I am trying to say, watch this, all of you. So here, basically, I'll just go here and execute. Answer is 30. Beautiful. Now watch this, same thing. If I were to come here and if I were to duplicate this line, and now I'll again call calc, I'll pass 10 and 20, but this time instead of add, I'm going to pass sub. What is sub? Sub is your callback function. Is nothing but a function which you are passing as input to another function. Calc is your higher order function and your sub is your callback function. Callback functions are functions which are called later inside the higher order function. And this time, what is callback? Callback, when I call, what I'm indirectly calling is sub. Similarly, if I were to duplicate this line and pass mul, now try to understand, now inside calc what is callback? That is nothing but your mul function. And hence, if in case I were to come here, clear the screen and execute the code, 30 minus 10, 200. That's it. This is the fundamental concept of callbacks. I know around 70 to 80% you have understood. If I now do one more example, I'm sure the clarity will be 100%. Let's move on to the next one. Now the second example is going to give us much more clarity. Please observe, okay? So the fundamental concept of callback is what? There is a higher order function or a host function to which you pass another function as input and it will call it back later. Simple as that, right? So now try to understand. Let's take a simple example where we need to now calculate the areas of different shapes. Circle, the formula for area is pi r square. For a square, because all sides are equal, the area formula is side into side. If it is an equilateral triangle, where again all sides are equal, the formula is square root of 3 divided by 4 multiplied by a square, right? That is the formula, and I am putting it here for your reference. Now, I will be creating one function which I will call as circle area, like this. I have already typed it out to save time, inside which I will be now writing the formula, where if I pass radius, it will return pi. You can directly access it telling math.pi, you don't have to write 3.141 and all that, into radius, pi r square. Similarly, for square also, I will be creating a separate function which I have already typed and kept. I am just showing you, as you can clearly see, right? Side into side. And similarly, I am going to create another function to showcase the area of an equilateral triangle, which again I have typed and kept, which I am showcasing like this. Am I clear till here? Where you can see square root of 3. Math dot square root of 3 will give you square root of 3 divided by 4. This result I am multiplying it by side into side. That is nothing but a in this case, side into side. So I hope everybody have understood the three functions. Now these three functions are my callback functions, which I will pass to another function. So now what I am going to do is, since you understood this, I am just removing this from the equation. Now watch it. Now what I will be doing is very simple. I will now go and create one more function, which I will like to call as calculate area function. And this calculate area function is so cool. All I need to do is pass it a value. The value could be radius, the value could be side, the value could be the side of an equilateral triangle, it could be the side of a square, it could be the radius of a circle, value. And then, comma, I have to just pass it one callback. That's it. Now inside this what I will do is, I will just go and I will directly say console.log, and I would now like to print the value. Now see, what will I do? I will call my callback function and I will pass it the value. This is my higher order function, this is my host function, right? Now inside this what I am going to do is, now I will come outside. Now watch the magic. Now what I will do is, let us assume I want to calculate the area of a circle. I will not call calculate circle area function. Instead, I will be calling this calculate area function, and to this I will now pass it a value. Now let us assume I want to calculate the area of a circle and the radius value is 5. That's it. Comma, now I need to give it a callback in order to calculate the radius of a circle for me. And that, my friends, is none other than this function circle area. So I will copy this and I will paste it here. I am passing circle area. Now if you understood the previous discussion correctly, you know what happens when I call this 5 goes and sits inside value. Next, this circle area, whatever is the address of the function called as circle area, will go and sit inside this variable called as callback. Which means in my program, outside this function, I can call circle area function using this name. Inside my higher order function or host function, if I say callback, then I am calling the same function. And hence when I say console.log, call callback and pass the value. What is value? 5. What is callback? Circle area, which means I am calling this function circle area with the radius value as 5. It will calculate the result for me and it will come back and return it, which I will be printing. And the memory is the same as last time. I hope you don't want me to show it to you again. And now if in case I were to go here and I were to execute it, you can see this is the radius. Similarly, if I want to just go back here and instead of circle area, let us assume 5 was the side of a square. Now what should I do? I should be passing one function called as, or a callback function called as square area. That's what I will pass. Now if in case I were to just go here, clear the screen and I were to execute it, now you can see I got 5 into 5, 25, which is the square area. Similarly, let us assume phi was the side of an equilateral triangle. All sides are equal, right? And I wanted to calculate the equilateral triangle's area. Then I will be passing this function as callback. In which case now, if I were to clear the screen and I were to execute it, there you go. So I hope you understood the fundamental concept of callback, which is passing a function as an input to another function and calling it inside that. That's it. And all this is made possible in JavaScript because functions are objects, they are first-class citizens. I hope you understood. Now there are multiple applications to this concept. All that we will explore it at a later point of time. My friends, I hope you enjoyed the concept of callbacks, and I highly recommend that all of you go and practice each and every concept that is being taught here, because just by watching me code, there is no way you're going to become a programmer. Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing and leaving a comment on the channel. It really helps us in many ways. Thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.